Welcome back, everyone. I hope you're all enjoying your lunch and enjoyed the breakout session and the morning plenaries. Here, our lunch programming is going to focus on different ways companies can build stronger communities by having an eye on the future, whether it's through workforce development, closing the digital divide, or sustainability. Building a strategy to make your company more resilient to what's ahead can make your business and also your community stronger. Our first session focuses on efforts to bridge the digital divide. And our second session is a panel discussion on how business leaders are working to future-proof their companies and society. So, for our first discussion, please join me in welcoming Michelle Brown, founder of Common Lit, Jessica Clancy, Vice President of Corporate Social Responsibility for NBCUniversal, and Elizabeth Lindsay, Executive Director of Bite Back.
Thank you. I'm Jessica Clancy, Vice President of Corporate Social Responsibility at Comcast NBCUniversal. And I'm so happy to be here today with two of our friends, who I'll introduce in a moment. But just to set up the conversation, today we're going to talk about, quickly, in 20 minutes, the digital divide, which, to frame the issue for all of you, and I'm sure some of you are very familiar, but nearly 25% of households below the poverty line do not have access to broadband. So we know that households earning less than $35,000 a year are far less to be online. And when we compare that with high-earning households, we know 92% with incomes over $75,000 a year have access to a broadband connection. So we have a fundamental issue as we think about how people get connected. At Comcast NBCUniversal, this is an issue that we are all in on. It is our #1 priority from a community impact perspective. We actually believe that it is this generation's civil rights issue as it relates to getting broadband to every house, regardless of race and economic situation. So we're all in, and to date, we've committed more than $350 million in cash and in kind to this issue. And our signature program, Internet Essentials, which hopefully all of you have heard about, has since 2001 connected 4 million low-income Americans to the internet. But we know as a company of our size, we could not do that alone. And so that's why I'm so happy to be here with Michelle Brown of Common Lit and Elizabeth Lindsay of Bite Back. So Michelle is the founder and CEO of Common Lit, which is a free online reading program that serves students in over 37,000 schools. And Elizabeth Lindsay of Bite Back is an organization that teaches computer skills and prepares underserved communities for careers. I'm lucky to know both of them in a variety of capacities, but Michelle actually is part of the accelerator Fast Forward, which is the only nonprofit dedicated to helping other nonprofits accelerate their technology for social change. And Comcast NBCUniversal is a founding partner of Fast Forward, as we believe technology and moving technology into communities to solve social issues is going to be a key driver of economic mobility. Bite Back is a tremendous partner to ours as it relates to digital literacy and online digital learning, and we've funded Elizabeth's program for a few years now. So welcome to both of you, and thank you for joining me. So I will jump right in. Just to start off, what do you want to make sure everybody knows about your organization?
Sure, so I'll start. Common Lit is really unique because it's a free online reading program. It's a tech nonprofit program that is super scalable, but we designed the reading program specifically with low-income schools in mind. So my background was I started, my first job after college was actually teaching 7th grade reading in a very high poverty school in rural Mississippi. And so the classroom that I walked into just had nothing. And so I dreamed of a tool and a technology tool, and specifically a reading program that would specifically address the unique challenges that low-income schools and that teachers in those schools face. So what's super exciting is that I started the organization back in 2013 when I was in graduate school. Today we serve 2.6 million registered teachers and students. And fun fact, super exciting. We are in a very high growth period right now, gaining about 20,000 new registered users per day. So if I look stressed out, it's because I am. No, so that's just a testament to the power of technology with a nonprofit business model and partners like Comcast and all of our corporate supporters that have helped us get to this point.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. My organization, Bite Back, is a 20-year-old nonprofit. We're based here in Washington, D.C., and we train unemployed and underemployed adults in technology, and we help them move into living wage careers that use technology. Last year, we taught 700 adults, and we helped a number of people, over 60 people, move into living wage careers. And on average, they're making $28,000 a year more now than they were before they came to Bite Back. And thank you. And it's been really striking for me in my time at Bite Back to see how deep the digital divide is, even in a place like Washington, D.C., which is one of the country's most educated regions. We have hundreds of people who are adults, ranging in age from 18 to 60, who come to us who have really never used a computer before. And with training and support, these same individuals can not only learn how to use technology, but really enter into the tech sector and create wonderful jobs in IT and really change the face of tech as we know it.
Great, and so Elizabeth starts to talk about sort of where we want to take the conversation, but the digital divide is a very broad problem and it means something different to different communities. And so given the work that both of you do, can you provide some perspective on, what does it look like in the communities you serve? What does it look like in the schools you serve? And how does it really impact the student?
Mm-hmm. So I think you made this comment before. I've heard Elizabeth talk about the digital divide as like a three-pronged stool. Am I saying that right? Three-legged stool, where you have hardware, you need a device, you need internet, but then you also need training. And so I think that both of our organizations solve for that piece really well. And so what I can say about low-income schools specifically is that when we started CommonLit back in 2013, it was really all about the internet and the hardware. And only about 13% of students in public schools back in 2013 had consistent access to a computer where there's a 1-to-1 student-to-computer ratio with high-speed internet in the school. Today, it's something like over half. So you can see that we've had this huge influx into public schools of like hardware and devices, as hardware especially is becoming cheaper and cheaper. But now the digital divide, I think, is more about what we are asking children to do on their devices. And what we're asking them to do matters a lot. And there is a huge divide there with the expectations that we have. And so we're not going to solve this if children are playing Flappy Bird on their phones. They need to be building models in Excel and not just being able to do that independent work to get the hard skills for our changing economy, but also the soft skills. So like collaborating with your colleagues on a Google Doc and like all the things that you and I take for granted about how you might do that. So that's what I can say about that context.
Yeah, I think we really see the impact of the digital divide very similarly with adults. We work with predominantly in low-income communities in our region, and what we see is that people not only don't know how to use a computer, but are unable to do things that so many of us take for granted. For example, it's really hard to apply for a job, even at a fast food restaurant, without being able to access the internet, to be able to know how to fill out a web form, without having a resume that's in Word that you can attach to an email. And so as our society has become increasingly dependent on technology, we see that people are left out more and more and are really stuck in a world where there are very few economic opportunities available to them. And then even things like communicating with your children's school now are done more and more online. And so we're really leaving out huge swaths of our population from just daily life and daily participation in our society.
Right, and I think one thing that we've talked about, and I've been fortunate enough to spend a lot of time with both of these women, is the idea of closing the digital divide it's no longer good enough just to be connected, right? So we're talking about sort of the digital divide 2.0 and what that looks like beyond connectivity. And obviously a big part of that is inclusion. And we talk a lot about that at Comcast, is how are we ensuring that we're including everybody in this revolution, because everybody sort of starts at a different journey point. And so as we move beyond connectivity and sort of to that 2.0 discussion, can you talk a little bit about the work you're doing specifically around inclusion? And what's lovely about this panel and how we set it up is that they sort of cover the sector from K all the way through adult workforce. We get a great perspective kind of on the spectrum of how different people are using the internet.
Yeah. So I think for both of us, like Michelle said, we're really focused on that training aspect. Having a device is wonderful and having internet is wonderful. But what we're seeing is that people really don't know how to use devices, and especially use a computer. And I think we sometimes think, well, everyone has a smartphone, so we're good. But there's so many things that are difficult, if not impossible, to do on a smartphone. I mean, I think we've all tried to fill out a web form on a smartphone. It's not great. And when we walk into our offices in the morning, we're not sitting down and doing emails on our phones. We're sitting down and using a computer. And so we really focus in on getting folks those skills so that they can succeed and build a career and actually do the things that I think a lot of us take for granted.
Mm-hmm. We think about it in terms of product design. So when we think about like mobile optimization, it's not just like a nice to have. It's like, this is an equity argument. It's an inclusion argument. It has to be mobile optimized. It has to be lightweight for low bandwidth phones. And printing is something that a lot of schools, especially in low-income areas, might not totally be one-to-one yet. And so we have to work with these kind of like transitional models, and then also just go on the ground and work with institutions and with teachers.
And part of that, which leads us to our conversation on partnerships. So, clearly as a large corporation, one of the ways that we drive our priorities forward is through amazing partnerships. Would just be so interested to hear from sort of the nonprofit perspective, how you think about partners, how you partner with other nonprofits who are doing the same work that you're doing to avoid duplication, but then also for all of the business leaders in the room, how you think about beyond monetary contribution, a partnership with a corporation.
Absolutely. I mean, for us, we've relied a lot on the corporate foundations and the corporate community, because I think that they actually understand our model, that we are a tech company. We're not a regular direct service nonprofit organization. And so one really unique program that I'll mention, that Jessica mentioned, is Fast Forward. And so Fast Forward is the only tech accelerator specifically focused for technology nonprofits, which is kind of this rare breed of startup founder. And there are a lot of really unique challenges for that specific type of business model when you're building technology, but then focusing on the underserved and a consumer who cannot pay. And so how can you sustain that? And so that program has been transformative for us, especially in the early stages. And now I think our growth is just a testament to that.
Mm-hmm.
I think an interesting way that we partner with corporations specifically is as corporations as employers of our students, and corporations as folks who are providing volunteers, mentors, as well as internships to our students. I know that many of you work in companies, and I know that diversity is such a key issue. And there are organizations like Bite Back across the country that are training incredible people who are diverse, who come from diverse backgrounds, and who have the skills and the drive to build careers. So I think that's a really important way that corporations can partner with nonprofits. Another interesting model that we have experienced this year is that WeWork, which is a large co-working company, recently created something called the Creator Awards, where they are going around the world and finding interesting startups and nonprofits and giving them grants and really flexible capital that we can really grow and expand. And we won a significant investment from WeWork, $360,000 last year through the Creator Awards. It's a pitch competition, and it's just been a really interesting partnership. Not only is that amount of funding just transformative for us because it's money that we can really invest in our expansion, but the partnership with WeWork is one that is not just about the money. They're providing us with space, they provide us with support and best practices support, and it's been really great. So I think it's a really creative model.
Yeah, and I think for corporations, and we think about this a lot at Comcast NBCUniversal, is we talk so broadly in the business community about how we can leverage our unique assets to drive social change. But you really have to get in on the ground, which is what we were able to do with Fast Forward, to understand what technology is being used to solve these social issues and where we can either leverage our employees, our dollars, our media reach, our assets to create content, right, to help create content which drives impact. And so, some of these models we start talking a lot about in terms of freeing up philanthropy, freeing up sort of new models of giving to allow people to really build products that make their way into communities and to prototype products, right? And so we're not expecting sort of perfection from the first prototype, but we're really working with a lot of these startups and entrepreneurs to help support the ecosystem, if you will, of the products that are in communities, test them, and then refund them as they think about kind of the 2.0 version. And we've just seen tremendous results and, through programs like Fast Forward and others who are really, really committed to the idea that nonprofits can drive solutions in communities, and in this instance, really help us move the needle on the digital divide. So we have a few more minutes left. I'd just love each of you to leave the audience with one thing. What's the best takeaway? What can they do to help move this conversation forward or to support you in your endeavors moving forward?
I mean, the first thing I'll say is we want all the corporate sponsors to please come and find me. But also just beyond direct funding, I mean, we have a data set with 24 million rows. And so we need the best data scientists. We need the best minds on this problem. And so that just employee time is a way for your CSR arm to get engaged with us, and also has tremendous value. And then I'll also just say, invest in your local communities. Yep. Start, internship programs. Open up your doors to be more inclusive.
Totally agree. Whatever corporate sponsors you don't get, Bite Back would gladly take. I think what Michelle said is exactly right. I think it's really important. I think the partnerships between the corporate sector and nonprofit are really transformative for us. And if you're in the DC region, I'd love to talk with you about hiring Bite Back students, volunteer opportunities at Bite Back. And I think the digital divide is real, and I think sometimes we can forget that it exists. We all work in places where we have access to computers. My 5-year-old has her own iPad. We live in this world where we don't necessarily see the effects, but there are millions of people in our country who don't have access to the internet and who really are being left behind. And so I think we can all, I implore everyone to be creative about ways that we can really address it.
Wonderful. Yeah, and I'll just close in saying that the digital divide is beyond real. It impacts the way that we are able to move our business forward in communities. where we live and work outside of especially a lot of these sort of high wealth metro communities and urban centers. And so as we think about cities and we think about the role of civic tech and we think about how we're kind of coming together as partners to drive some of those conversations forward, we're really open and looking for other partnerships, where we can take that kind of 2.0 conversation and really extend beyond the connectivity is the first step, but what's next? What else are we doing in terms of inclusion and access and how important that is? So thank you all for spending some of your lunch with us, and please join me in thanking Elizabeth and Michelle on the panel.
A lot of what we think we are is what the world says we are. It's really hard to say something to someone's face, but it's really easy to type something out and hit send.
It'd be one thing if someone who looked like me was teaching you how to code. But if it's someone who just a few weeks ago was standing on the corner with you, that's a powerful message.
What astounded me was how many people are eligible for status in the US but remain undocumented. The reason we're able to eliminate the cost barrier is we're using technology to streamline all of the paperwork.
How can we even the playing ground no matter what zip code you live in? Technology is going to do that. It's looking at my daughter wanting to pave the way so it's a little bit easier for her, and every kid that looks like her and is her age and everyone in between.
If you really want to do something, working on a local level is going to be the fastest way to make real change and impact. We're really excited to change the way we talk about public finance.
What if I could force them to think about what they were doing? That's really where it begins.
If we fail young people, it's because we failed. We have to give them the tools, skills, the emotional wherewithal, and get out of the way.
Thank you to our sponsor and partner, Comcast NBCUniversal. And now, to facilitate our future-proofing business and society panel, the former Undersecretary of State for Public Diplomacy and Chairman, Glassman Advisory, Ambassador James Glassman.
Well, welcome to what I think will be a very stimulating panel. We've got a wonderful group here. Let me just introduce them briefly. So this is Tae Yu, who is the Senior Vice President for Corporate Affairs at Cisco. Next is Ray Dempsey, Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer at BP America and President of the BP Foundation. Next is Katie Fallon, Executive Vice President for Corporate Affairs at Hilton Worldwide. And finally, Mary Jo Quinn, Vice President and Assistant General Counsel of the Allstate Corporation. We're going to have a conversation today about future proofing and about corporate citizenship, which is really what you've been talking about at this entire conference. So I want to start off with something that's a little bit stimulating, I hope. A quote from Milton Friedman, which is somewhat appropriate, I think, for the U.S. Chamber. And many of you have heard this quote before. And I think this group here is kind of the answer to this quote. But let me give it to you. So there is one and only one responsibility for business: to use its resources and engage in activities designed to increase its profits, so long as it stays within the rules of the game. So what we've seen evolve over the years is really corporate social responsibility and corporate citizenship, which perhaps is a challenge to what the god Milton Friedman had to say. So one of the things I want to ask this group is really what their response to people who say, gee, you should only be making profits. And I think I know what the answer is, but I want to hear from them. The other topics that we're going to be discussing are, how did you choose the programs that you did? And we really want to hear about these programs because I know something about them and they are really interesting and I think all of you can learn from them. What was the actual process for choosing programs. How long does a program typically last? What are the challenges that you face right now? Do you consider political elements in your decision on programming? And then I kind of like to get personal in these things. How did you, what was your own preparation for the job you have now? How did you get to where you are? And finally, what can companies think about doing today that they couldn't have 5 to 10 years ago? And I think some of the programs here will be perfect in responding to that. So I want to start with Tay and ask this very simple question, although please keep in mind some of the things that I said earlier. What does future-proofing mean to you when you're thinking about organization and your social and environmental impact? And also, just for starters, tell us what you're doing at Cisco. I know that this networking academy is really interesting.
So one of the things I wanted to clarify, because I know some of the conversations that were going on in this conference and others, is they think about CSR as equals philanthropy, and it's actually more than that. It really is about people, society, and the planet. And so this kind of weaves together this future-proofing. It's the sustainability of your organization. It's the sustainability of your communities. So when you think about people, it's about attracting talent. Reflecting on Milton Friedman's comments, he's talking about business as this cold entity, and it's not. The most important asset in any business or any organization is the human capital, the talent. It's the drive. You can talk about technology, and we're very proud of that, don't get me wrong. It's just that it ages very quickly, and so it's the passion and the knowledge that employees bring. When it comes to society, you want to have an environment where anyone can participate so they could be part of that pipeline. There's a whole sense of doing the right thing, and that's all built in to creating this resilient community. And then the environment, I like to think that it goes without saying, because there's so much impact that we have as we develop and digitize our world. What can we do to address that? So that's kind of how it's set up. And one of our major focuses is around economic empowerment and economic resiliency, and that's where the Network Academy program comes in. It is really focused on designing and installing networks. When you think about the future of the digital economy, it's built on networks. So when we went from an industrial economy to a knowledge-based economy, and now that we're transitioning into a digital economy, every single thing we do, it's not just every job, but every single thing we do has that component. And we think it's incredibly important that we make that available. The previous moderator said that she thought internet access was a civil right. I would argue it's a human right, in the sense that without that kind of technology and the ability to maneuver in this digital society, you can't do anything. So that's what Network Academies is. It's in 180 countries. 7.8 million people have gone through that. And what's really important about it is that when we went to Afghanistan in 2002 and trained the first class, 6 of them were women. And the lowest score after the first semester was a 94. And what you couldn't say is, well, that's pretty good for a least developed country, because it's the same assessment you would have whether it's in Afghanistan or in Silicon Valley.
And so what do you teach them at these academies?
Basically networking, right? Because that's the underpinning of the digital economy and the internet economy. So that you can then, it's 280 hours, very intensive, and you can actually walk in and install and design a network when you're done. And
so you have 7.8 million people who've done 280 hours worth of work on that?
Well, it varies. It's a whole series of courses. We do know that 70% of them go on to get better jobs. But that's only one piece of what we consider is about global problem solving, because that's what the digital economy is about. So we've made a commitment to positively impact 1 billion people by 2025. The Network Academies is what I would call our high touch. The others are in partnership with other NGOs and other corporations.
Well, I want to move on to Ray. So tell us what's happening at BP, and one question specifically for you. You're also the head of the BP Foundation.
I am.
And I know there is something of a change within many corporations to kind of fold, well, I guess you can't fold the foundation into the corporation, but either maybe eliminating a foundation. But what's the role of the foundation today?
That's great. I'll say, as I start, Ambassador, that I'm delighted I didn't have to remember all the other questions you framed in the introduction. I was nervous I was going to have to remember all those and find a way to respond. I want to start, though, by building on something Tay said about the Milton Friedman quote that you read us all. I say often to people that businesses that fail to earn a profit cease to exist. So there's no doubt that there's an essential connection between the notion of profitability and the purpose and the mission of corporations. But I think it's, despite my belief that Friedman is indeed must be brilliant, it is essential, in my opinion, that the things we do to contribute to society are not seen as mutually exclusive to our ability to be profitable. And in fact, often I'd say they're entirely connected. And that'll take me to the question you've asked about our foundation. So I'll cover that, then I'll come back to the question of future-proofing. In our foundation, we recognize that there are things that we want to contribute to, want to shape, and it's fully philanthropy. There's no strings attached. We're not looking to have our logo blazoned on the screen. We're not looking for opportunities to leverage opportunities for influence and engaging with officials. So we take very seriously that in our foundation, we are aligned around particular causes, and the single greatest of those is STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and math. And when we make commitments through the foundation, it's entirely in service of helping to close STEM achievement gaps, especially for women and underrepresented minorities. With our corporate contributions, our community investments, as we call them, we're frankly determined to ensure that we treat them as investments and we reap real value. Now, the alignment and the priority areas for our community investments are exactly the same as they are in our foundation. They're primarily around education. There's things around the environment, and then ultimately some interest in supporting economic development and particularly working in a space that I lead, supplier diversity. So we don't work too hard to maintain a real difference between the priorities and the focus areas, but we're really careful about the difference in the way we try to leverage the investments. I'll say really fast just on the theme of future-proofing. I had to Google it. I've heard the phrase. I didn't have deep expertise. It was there, and there's a great
How many millions of entries were there?
It makes a lot of sense fundamentally that you're just anticipating the way the world's going to look, the way the world's going to change, and then putting in mitigating approaches to ensure that your business is fit to succeed. And there's two themes I'll just toss out is where we focus there. One is around our workforce, just as Tay described. We're mindful that demographics, particularly in the U.S., are changing fast. And with a primarily STEM education-based workforce, we've got to do things to help close achievement gaps and see more women and minorities in those fields. We also are, as we call it, advancing the energy transition. The world is moving to a lower carbon energy future, and we're a big part of that. And there's an awful lot of things we're doing now to drive our investments and ultimately to shape that lower carbon energy future while meeting the world's energy demands today.
I was wondering whether, Tay, do you have a foundation?
Yes, we do. We have a foundation.
And how's it integrated into?
So the foundation board members sit on both the company and the foundation. The foundation is exclusively grant making and matching. We do about maybe 15 times more in the corporate investment side, and we also call it investments as well. So they have to be in alignment, but the foundation obviously cannot, uphold any or fulfill any commitments by the company. So,
so Katie, tell me what Hilton is doing and how you are future-proofing.
For future-proofing. We have, first I want to address Milton Friedman because I can't leave him out.
Oh, sure, please.
So I'm curious if you ever met our founder, Conrad Hilton, who founded Hilton 100 years ago and who opened his first hotel in Cisco, Texas because he wanted to spread the light and warmth of hospitality through the world in the hopes of spreading international peace through the world. So even though he made a lot of profit over the course of his career, it was a very purpose-driven mission from day one. And to Ray's point, I do think you can do both at the same time, have a purpose-driven business model and still deliver profits for the business. But I wonder if we could survive today without having purpose be paramount. And I'll give an example. Just 82% of Hilton guests polled just over the last 10 days said that they choose to stay in a Hilton flagged hotel because of what we're doing for the environment and in our communities from a social responsibility standpoint. That's a profit-driven decision investment that we're making in these programs to drive customer interest in our brands. And with the level of distrust that exists out there in all institutions, but primarily in governments and in media, I think business hangs in the balance, and we can really do more to lean into our social impact stories so that we can be generating and fostering those close, direct relationships with our guests so that they trust making consumption decisions. So future-proofing is easy it's easy for us to decide where to prioritize our future-proofing in the hotel business because there are 3 global trends that drive our decision-making and future-proofing. One is we are part of the largest employment sector of the world. Travel and tourism is expected to hire about 90 million people over the next decade. And we need to hire, across our 5,000 properties, we need to hire a lot of young people and cultivate that talent to deliver that people-serving people customer service that we're known for. So to attract that talent, we need to, especially in our pioneer countries, we need to play a strong role in closing skills gaps and also educating young people about career paths in hospitality. Interestingly, a fact that I learned when I started at Hilton a year ago is that over half of all hotel company executives got their start in entry-level jobs at a hotel. So the career pathing is really something somewhat impressive. The second trend is that as the global traveler base explodes, so does our physical scale and scope across the industry. We're building new hotels everywhere. Hilton alone has over 5,000, and we're just a small fraction of the overall global hotel industry. And when we build more hotels, we're all consuming a lot of energy and water and food, and to have a sustainable presence in those communities, we have to be good stewards of how we're using those resources in our communities and in some instances, those limited resources in some of our developing countries. And so we have designed a proprietary energy water waste program that we make a brand standard. If you want to be a Hilton hotel, you have to measure your energy, water, and waste consumption. You have to have goals for reducing it every year, and we're constantly following up with the individual hotels to make sure they're meeting those goals, but also demonstrating to them how much they're saving as a result of the implementation of that program. It's called LightStay. And last but most importantly, as the travel and tourism base grows and the hospitality industry grows with it, we have to make sure that we're being responsible about sustainable tourism, especially in countries where demand for tourists is outpacing the infrastructure that can host those tourists when they get there. And for us, we're paying close attention to a fact that of every $100 spent in a tourist destination, only $5 of it goes back into the local community. So we're trying to use our physical hotels to change that dynamic, to make sure we're locally sourcing, that we're empowering and partnering with local small businesses and really making the community benefit from the tourists that visit there.
So you're talking about, a lot of what you talked about is the way you run your business, which is great.
Yes.
But what about, are there things that you do programmatically that say they're similar to what Tay and Ray were talking about?
So interestingly, these 3 pillars I've discussed, they came to be at Hilton in 2011 through the corporate social responsibility platform, which we call Travel with Purpose. So the corporate social responsibility team laid out, after a materiality assessment across the business, laid out these 3 priorities as social impact priorities that have since been so broadly accepted across the business that they're seamless with our business operations today.
So actually, that answers a really important question, which kind of feeds back to the Milton Friedman. You know, if all you're looking at is kind of pure profit motive, it's usually fairly easy to decide what you want to do as a business. Choosing kind of corporate citizenship programs, for example, is in a lot of ways more difficult. You know, how do you choose? How do you decide to do what you're doing? And so you answered that through this 2011 work that the corporate social responsibility people did.
Exactly, yes. And I think in a sign that we have made progress in demonstrating the positive business impact from corporate social responsibility, it is now so ingrained in the culture of the organization that we're ready to take the next steps with Travel with Purpose and reinvigorate it and take it to the next level. And we're calling it Travel with Purpose 2.0, and it's going to be defined by our business partners and where we take it next year.
So how many people at Hilton's don't require that their towels be washed every day?
It's a really good question. So, you know, I think one of the things I'm most excited about, there's been some recent press on this from a technology standpoint, but Hilton has invented this smart room capability called Connected Room. And for guests, it's great because it's just a seamless extension of your smartphone. When you enter into a Hilton hotel room, it'll populate the room with your own photographs, your channels, your music that you like to listen to. Wow. But the reason why I like it so much as the corporate social responsibility lead is that it also empowers the guests to control their environmental footprint in room and take the credit for that. And so they'll be able to individually assess how much they saved from not washing their towels, how much they saved from recycling their soap or using less water, opting out of a housekeeper. And then eventually we would like to get to a point where that value could be captured and empowering them to be an individual change maker with their savings through their smartphone.
Very interesting. But let me ask you one other question, which I'm going to ask everybody else. How did you get in the job that you're in?
I don't know. I left the White House I left the White House in the spring of 2016. I was working as President Obama's legislative director, and I had twin boys, and I transitioned out of the White House in the spring of 2016, and I heard from the CEO of Hilton 2 weeks later who invited me to lunch, and it was not part of my future plan for myself, but over the course of that 2.5-hour lunch, I fell in love with the industry and what he was trying to do, particularly with this role, and I didn't look back from that conversation.
But you didn't really have any preparation in the hospitality industry, other than
none. I mean, I came from a very inhospitable world of politics. But I do think the one thing that I talk to my team a lot about is that first, and as everyone here knows, to get all of our business partners aligned on corporate social responsibility investments and prioritizations takes a lot of collective problem solving and negotiating. So I think my dozen years or so working with members of Congress helped me prepare for that.
So Mary Jo, I'm so sorry that you're so far away from everybody. How did this
I'll come right over.
Maybe I'm supposed to sit there, I don't know. But so how did you get the job you have at Allstate?
One would think, being vice president in charge of investment law, you would think I wasn't a special ed teacher for 7 years before I went to law school, but there you have it. I've always been very passionate about social issues, and I think when I went to law school, it never crossed my mind that I could work for a corporation where you could actually do tons of really good things while you were also making money. And so I think in the end, I married two really great things together, law and being able to work for a company that lets me bring really cool pro bono projects to life, and then also has the foundation that wants me to help out in that area. So it's been two absolutely different lives. Investment attorney and special ed teacher don't usually blend too well.
No, but it was good preparation?
It has been. And when I worked at a law firm, it was great preparation to deal with partners.
So tell us what, right. So tell us what Allstate is doing in the corporate citizenship.
All right, well, we too have a foundation, and we have two really big projects that we work on. One is the Purple Purse project, I didn't think that you guys would steal it. It's just a visual up here for you. The Purple Purse Project is where we do a lot of work with the domestic abuse situations. And we have, this year, we have Serena Williams is our spokesperson who designed this bag. And I was lucky enough to win one in a silent auction where I outbid my boss's boss. So that was really not too smart, but I love the bag. So we've, so far in the domestic abuse arena, the reason we even took up this cause is that no large corporation was doing this. And about 13 years ago, we decided that we needed to do it. And we realized that through the research, it shows that the main reason that women don't leave an abusive situation or go back to one is because they don't have the financial empowerment to be able to leave. And so that's why we did the Purple Purse, purple the color of domestic violence, purse because we believe if women had the purse strings, they would be able to leave. So with our financial background, we decided to be able to train people on financial empowerment. And we have, in the last 13 years, given $55 million to organizations, shelters all across the country, and a lot of it in the literacy training that we're doing, the financial literacy training that we're doing to help women. We've, thank you. And it's been, from my point of view as a lawyer, it's been pretty exciting because we, in the law department, we were working on clemency and expungement cases to help people with a nonviolent criminal record try and get it off of their record so that they could get a job. You know, these are people who are not looking for handouts, they're looking for jobs and to change their lives. So when we were doing that in the law department and the foundation was doing Purple Purse, what I realized is a lot of the people that I was working with as clemency pro bono clients were women who had a drug charge from 15 years ago, and every time they described the situation, it seemed to me that they weren't saying it was a domestic abuse situation, but you could feel something about it. And I went to the head of the foundation and I said, look, all the lawyers are doing this work, the foundation's doing this work. It seems to me that the women we're dealing with were in domestic abuse situations. And so we just started, only 2 months ago, we started taking our financial literacy and our clemency piece together, and we have lawyers working in shelters now in Chicago that we didn't have 2 months ago. But it's the foundation and the law. Thanks.
So how does this work fit in with the business itself? So I'll play the Milton Friedman role.
Yeah. Well, at Allstate, we're all about people because we need to protect people from life's uncertainties and to help people prepare for the future so that they can get their, their dreams and their hopes accomplished. But we truly believe that every corporation should be and can be a force for good in the community. And we truly believe that that's what every corporation should do. So we have employees and agency owners have put in, I think it's over 230,000 volunteer hours in their communities in the last year. We've given a lot of money towards, we also have a youth empowerment program because we feel that we need to train the youth to be emotionally and socially responsible and to understand that they need to be leaders, because that's one of the ways we believe we're future-proofing our company, because it's the same thing, you need to have people. All we sell is a promise that we're going to do something for people later. So we need the people to be there and to understand that social responsibility is very, very important.
So you're talking about your own workforce?
Right. Well, we're not hiring the 15-year-olds yet, but I think we will be. Right. And so youth empowerment is one of the two things we work on. The Purple Purse and then youth empowerment is really, we work with an organization called WE, W-E, and it's getting kids in the high school age to choose one local project and one global project that they work on. You can be any cause that they want it to be. And as they work on these things, there's a school curriculum about this. It's called We Day and We Schools. And in those, in that program, kids work on these two things. And if they've worked on them and they log their hours in, then they get the opportunity to go to, it's kind of like It's like a rock concert, kind of all day long affair at a big stadium throughout the United States. I think there are 16 different stadiums. And they'll have these We Days where kids who have done the work, and then they get to go to these, they're really engagement sessions where they can learn to even be better leaders. And then there are stars like, you know, Selena Gomez and people that they really want to see. So it encourages people to be leaders.
So how did you decide to do that? I mean, how did you decide to, let's say, partner or support this organization?
Well, that one, it kind of grew. What we did in 2005 until 2015, we were all about teen driving, which of course makes sense for, you know, the organization to be involved in that. And as we moved from teen driving, and I have to say even before that, we were all about, you know, getting seat belts as a requirement in cars. You know, you look back at, not everybody remembers when there weren't seat belts, but you know, that's the auto insurance industry that got that in place. Then teen driving, we're happy to say that the teen driving fatalities have absolutely drastically dropped because of a lot of the work that we've done. But then we moved from there into the youth empowerment, and a lot of it is you have to look at the future proofing and see that we moved a little bit, but we still see that the youth is really what we need for the future.
I didn't ask the two of you about how you got to where you are.
I created my job.
Really?
That's
always good.
I've been at Cisco since, you know, the early days. So I was in business development and did a lot of work with other organizations. And one of the things that really was interesting to me is how people have to, in the industrial economy, you had to leave in order to go somewhere to get a job. And, you know, the opportunity in front of us is, particularly now in the digital age, is that it shouldn't matter where you live. So if you have, you know, digital literacy, internet access, affordable internet access, because in some countries in Africa, service provision is more expensive than in the US for people who have a lot less money, and you have an infrastructure and the ability to learn when you can learn because of your life and things that are going on, that you can participate in the economy. So I kind of pitched the idea around this. Volunteering was always, you know, within the company, but I really wanted to look at how do we do something very strategic that will have, you know, long-lasting impact in the community, and they bid, so here I am.
Wow. So, but still, you call your job your senior vice president for corporate affairs, which every company has, right?
Well, so corporate affairs, I was looking at everybody's bios because I'm an obsessive preparer. And corporate affairs, when I do a benchmark, sometimes it's a bucket where you have government, you know, the lobbyists, and then you have the PR team sometimes, and then you have the community relations component. And at Cisco, we do them all separately, but integrated around a common purpose. And so, yeah, and so it's the foundation, it's our signature programs, it's really about global problem solving, and all the sustainability work is under there for us.
And Ray?
Like Tay, I created the role that I'm in today too. It was an evolution for several years. I had been here in Washington as the head of external affairs for BP for several years. And I had developed some, what I call strategic relationships that I believed would be more powerful if we linked them with some other activity. So it's not quite a corporate affairs construct in the way that Tay's just described, but I brought together our supplier diversity activity with our national strategic relationships, and especially in what I'll call diversity communities, along with our foundation, the philanthropic work, and embedded in that is as well our STEM education and veterans outreach and other dimensions, and now tied to it is our workforce diversity. I just saw an opportunity, Ambassador, to connect those dots in a way that would create more clarity of our employer identity for the outside world and frankly, more pride by our own existing employees and the commitments we make around the places that we live and work.
Great. So one of the questions I promised to ask was, I think the organizers wanted me to ask this. What companies think about what they can do today that they couldn't have done 5 or 10 years ago? It's a good question. You have any thoughts? Anybody?
I would say technology. has really had an impact.
I mean, you couldn't have been doing what you're doing with networking, or could you?
We could do some of them, but not to the magnitude and the scale that you can do now. You know, one of the most important things that is happening, it's a movement, we all know this, is this whole notion of innovation and, you know, hackathons and competitions and all of that, because it's digital is a horizontal thread through everything. Technology is a horizontal thread. And we just actually did a study with Oxford and Gartner around skills and what the future could hold. There's some very interesting findings about what the skill sets are, but you can't predict the jobs. And so what you really need to do is create an environment where people can create the jobs of the future. And the best way to create a job, as we all know, businesses got started because we solved a problem. And when you think about all the issues in a community, you could actually create profitable businesses that solve problems and the needs of that particular community around, you know, its own culture and religion and all those things. And I think that that's probably one of the things that we weren't as focused on before, but now you can do it at a global scale.
So actually, let me ask you a different question. How do you know you're doing a good job? How do you, are you, obviously, in other parts of your businesses, there's a lot of measurement going on. You know, hey, how much money do we make, or what were our revenues, our earnings, return on investment? How do you know that you're doing a good job, Mary Jo?
How's Allstate doing a good job in the community?
Yeah, I don't mean you personally, but I mean in your part of Allstate.
Yeah, I think when we look at the corporate responsibility part, we can look at what people in the company feel and how people are engaged with it. And I think if you have employees who are engaged, partly you already know you're doing a good job because people are dying to come to work to do whatever it is they're doing. And I think that we've been able to show that the corporate responsibility gives employees a lot of pride in working for us. But I think it's important to not only help the communities, as everyone up here has been saying, that's what we believe in doing, but as you have somebody who's thrilled to come to work that day because of what the company's doing, you know, car insurance is not really all that rip-roaring exciting if you just think about it every day, but people love to come to work because you have a lot of things that you can do. And when I just maybe 3 weeks ago, I saw somebody answer their phone, and I knew what was coming because the governor's office had called me and told me which one of the clemency clients were getting granted. And this woman answered the phone, and all of a sudden she's jumping up and down and crying. Now, we're in a law department. People don't do that a lot, you know? And it was because the governor's office had called to say that her client's clemency petition had been granted. That's the kind of thing that you know you're doing the right thing with employees when you see that kind of reaction. And I think that's one of the reasons everybody here could give examples that you're doing the right thing if your employees are really engaged.
So, I mean, is a metric kind of the number of employees who are participating in your programs, or is this kind of a silly kind of corporate speak? You don't really know. You know what you're doing. You know.
Yeah, and I think when people even when people talk about, oh, millennials care about what your company's doing for a social side of the world, and I think we're getting great new employees because they see what we do and they know that we care.
There's actually metrics, and I bet every organization that you work with has very specific metrics. So I want to dispel this notion that because it's not part of the business that there aren't metrics. So you can go anything from, the impact you've had on the students. So we kept up with them. 1.4 million said they got a job directly related to the course that they took. We made an investment, a partnership with Water for People and ACFO to create a GPS app using GPS, so that because women and girls spend so much time in developing countries looking for water, that they don't go to school, that's the opportunity issue, and then the fact that they are physically harmed. And you could map water points in 3 weeks versus 6 months, and you know now that there's over 15 million people using the app, so that's another measurement. It's how many students come to the class, how many graduate, what are they doing afterwards. Every organization has metrics, and I don't know that any of us would be in partnership with an organization if we couldn't report back, because we owe that to the employees because they spend time, and we owe that to the shareholders.
So, Kate, do you have examples of that?
Well, I'll tell you, I have to present to our board at Hilton this week on the metrics around our corporate.
So it's a good thing I asked you
yes.
this question. Right?
So I'm all prepared.
You didn't think about that before.
But we have to back it up with impact and show results, because these corporate social responsibility programs are mini startups in and of itself, and you have to show how they generate returns, not just for the business, but for team member retention, recruitment, things like that. But I'll give you a very powerful example of just in isolation of just one of many of our environmental programs, and that is our partnership with Clean the World on soap recycling. So a business traveler named Sean Siepler, several years ago, was going around to hotels and was just wondering what happens to all this soap that I'm leaving behind in all these hotels. And he launched a nonprofit called Clean the World and approached Hilton and said, I want to get all your used soap, repurpose it into hygiene kits, and address this problem we have in developing countries of too many young kids dying of infectious diseases that could be prevented with just by washing their hands. And since he approached us and we launched that signature program, we've recycled over 6 million bars of soap, and the death rates have gone significantly down in the distribution countries. And so
that's a great idea.
So, and it's that kind of sharing that kind of information with our team, with our employees, makes them enthusiastic, makes them want to participate in the
makes them want to jump up and down and cry.
Yeah, that's great. That's fabulous. Ray?
Ambassador, I want to reflect on something that both Mary Jo and Katie just described. And I have this mantra that I call intersection of interests. I think the most powerful and the most impactful corporate responsibility initiatives are things that are very clearly linked to and aligned with why that company exists. And when you identify that intersection of interest, it makes it that much more important that you engage not just your own employees in that work, but the communities, the organizations, the partners that you work with, and I see just extraordinary results. That's why I described one of our big priorities as being about STEM education. We know that in order for us to have a pipeline of talent for the long term in our company, in our industry, we've got to invest in encouraging young people to pursue STEM education. So I really love the stories that you both told, and it really reinforces my notion about this thing of intersection of interests.
Following up on that too, I think what's interesting is at Allstate we have the line that everybody leads from every seat, and I think that that's really a part of the engagement too. There was an example that somebody said, well, we've got a pretty big campus, and someone said, we should be growing food, we should be growing a garden, and it would give people a little time off from doing their job, their regular day job, and you could go over and work in the garden. We have bicycles that you can ride bicycles in between all the buildings, and so you can ride over to the Good Hands garden, and you can work over there. It was done by the law department, so you start off, you can work there, and then you take out you're getting all the produce, and you take it to a shelter. And then once a month, the law department does, they cook the dinner for everybody at the shelter using most of the produce that we've done. Well, then somebody else said, well, we have the Little Hands, which is the little kids' daycare center. So Little Hands kids come over and they start working with employees on doing this. Well, then we realized we've got this school in inner city Chicago, a grade school that we've been working with. Why don't we bring them all together? So the 5th graders from the school are now the pen pals of the little kids at the daycare. And they all come together, and it's all because it was just listening to people say, hey, why don't we do this? Why don't we do this? And it just totally grew. And I'm telling you, when you're on a conference call and you look out the window and you see one of your law clerks riding a bike back, and they come back and tell you how many pounds of produce they picked that day, it's also not what you expect at a big company. Yeah. But I'm telling you, it really makes people engaged, and again, we're helping the community. But I'm sure that you're all doing it. It's the same, you listen to everybody. There's a leader in every seat. And I think it's an important thing to, again, keep people engaged.
That's great.
Do you know, though, it's pretty common that corporations give employees time off to volunteer.
Yeah.
So we give 40 hours a year for every employee, and it's not.
You all do something, you do that or something like that?
What I really like is that in our foundation, we have an employee matching program. A lot of companies do that. We have a component that provides matching dollars for volunteer time. So you can work as an individual and submit that time and then get a financial contribution to your partner organization, or you can work in teams and really multiply the impact of how you can support those partners.
Yeah, we do that too. I think that's really great. And I'm not sure everybody takes advantage of it. You know, they forget to log their time, I think.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of time, according to Ray's watch, which I'm looking at, so that I don't have to like
which one, yeah,
conspicuously do this, we only have a few minutes left. So I wonder if we can just go around the table or around the chairs and the couch and ask if you can give us, 1 minute that on something that maybe you hadn't talked about before, but just kind of concluding remarks.
So I think that when we talk, and I'm sensitive to the conversation that happened right before us, which is people are looking for support. I think it really is a tight partnership of common interests and alignment. So that if you have a focus on STEM, obviously for us, and well, you as well, for a lot of different reasons, that we can partner with each other and that we can create an ecosystem. Because if you take on education, the fact that it exists today is a whole lot of people in the kitchen, a lot of cooks in the kitchen, and that to solve problems, it needs an ecosystem of partners. And everybody brings something to the table. I know that one of the panelists before said, we have, 23 million bucks of data that they need, the best and the brightest to help work with them. So there's a way to create an ecosystem if we have a common purpose, and Valerie's sitting right there, so I had a shout out for you. But if we have a common purpose about solving a specific problem, we can create an ecosystem with people who are aligned to that, whose expertise is in that area, and really have a measurable impact.
Great, right.
Ambassador, I was thinking about the brief introduction I made to the energy transition that we're working on in BP, and there's a phrase inside that we call the dual challenge, and I think that really reflects the way I'd want to sum up our thinking in this notion of future-proofing. For all companies, especially publicly traded, we've got this quarterly demand for results and performance, and that certainly drives the day-to-day thinking often. But we also recognize there is this real long-term that we have a responsibility to contribute towards. So in this lower carbon energy future, our commitment is to provide the world's energy needs today, in whatever forms those are, and prepare for this lower carbon energy future, and we must do both. It's not a trade-off, it's not a one or the other. We must do both, and we must do it in a way that actually meets the obligations to society to keep the lights and the power and the vehicles moving today, and making sure we have the opportunity to still do that in generations to come.
Great. Katie, I'm so sorry, I just realized I'm using a Weston pen. You don't own that.
I'm going to dock your honest points.
No. I know. No. Sorry. But I like Hilton.
Is it recyclable?
It doesn't really work very well. No, go ahead.
I think the one thing I wanted to raise is just the future of work conversations that are ongoing and prevalent across the world right now, and how certain industries like travel and tourism are going to have to be huge parts of the solution to increase unemployment caused from things like disruption and dislocation of jobs caused through automation. And we talk about this a lot internally, but I'll say, as a people serving people business, and one that just is going to be growing exponentially as the middle classes grow in places like India and China, we have to teach kids around the world that there are amazing career opportunities and job prospects in travel and tourism in general, but in the hotel industry specifically, and use that conversation to help close the skills gap that we're experiencing in some of these markets that we're recruiting in, and work with partners to do what we can to use digital opportunities to do that. So, listening to Tay, we developed this Passport to Success module, training module with International Youth Foundation, and we're trying to socialize it and share it in these frontier markets where we're developing. But it's not our core competency to do that, and so finding partnerships where we can leverage the presence and scale and scope of education partners that are out there already and that have the reputation that could help us, so we both benefit from the recruitment prospects but are also addressing a global challenge and societal problem that we're going to be facing in the decades ahead.
You know, I mean, one of the things I've gotten out of this panel is just the importance of workforce development. I mean,
Yes. Yeah.
it's tremendous. I know in Washington, everybody talks about jobs, 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 but the fact is you need the right people to fit into these jobs. And that, I think for a lot of businesses, that's kind of a crisis right now. So what you're doing really, as for corporate citizenship, it really does blend in very well with that need. Mary Jo.
I think at Allstate, we would say that certainly the technology that everyone's talked about is so important because it's really changing our business. Not only does it change the way we do claims, you know, it used to take 2 weeks, you're in a car accident, you drive it in to have somebody look at it, you know, they'd take some time, you go through all that. Now within, well, then you'd send them a check and then they'd have to cash the check. And now what used to take 2 to 3 weeks is taking about the same day. You could have been in a car accident this morning and you would have their money in your account this afternoon. So technology is totally changing the way, you know, we live in the business, but then you think about driverless cars and everything else. So I think trying to find the right people in technology is what we would say is a really important thing to just keep continuing to grow with the digital and the technology kind of world is so important to us, which I think is important to almost everybody.
Well, thank you. It's been a great panel, great people. Love talking to you, and I hope the audience enjoyed it as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Glassman, for facilitating that discussion. So now we're up for the second round of breakout sessions. Again, you'll see on the boards somewhere, we're going to show in the boards right soon enough where to go. They're going to start at 2:35. Again, ask our staff if you need directions. They're going to be out in the hallways directing traffic. Thanks again.